Good evening and welcome to ongoing election coverage from Town Meeting Television. Tonight we're covering the Burlington Central District. We'll be joined by candidates Tiki, Archambeau, Independent, also Perri, Freeman, the Incumbent Progressive, and Peggy, Luhrs, also an Independent, vying for a City Council seat in Burlington. This is one of many of the forums we're doing in advance of local town elections on Town Meeting Day, which of course is the first Tuesday in March. That's March the 2nd from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. if you're voting in person. You should be hopefully reaching out to your town clerk now and coming up with a plan to vote and be engaged for Town Meeting Day. Town Meeting Day television is your opportunity to learn about the candidates and issues that you'll see on the ballot when you get there in March. If you're watching this live, we welcome your questions at 802-862-3966. Again, that's 802-862-3966. Please note that when you do ask questions, that we'll frame those questions to each of the candidates. Each candidate will get a chance to respond to it. And remember that throughout the election season and in lead up to Town Meeting Day, you can watch Town Meeting TV on Comcast via channel 1087, Burlington Telecom, channel 17 and 217, and also Town Meeting TV's YouTube page. So for tonight's forum, candidates will be allowed 1 minute to provide an opening statement, where the general question will be, please tell us why you're running and what would be different from Burlington if you are elected. As we go through questions, and it looks like we have a large list of call-in questions, and we'll go to those mostly first, but candidates will have 2 minutes to respond to each question, and we'll rotate who answers first, starting first with the incumbent in terms of who will answer first. Each candidate will also be given an opportunity to ask a question of other candidates if our time allows. If a candidate's addressed during an answer, they'll have 30 seconds for rebuttal, and candidates will also hopefully have 30 seconds available for closing comments. And tonight's we'll use 2 time cards, one to indicate that there's 15 seconds left in the answer period, and one to indicate that time is up and please stop, and we'll try to give everybody equal airtime. So with that, I'm going to turn it back towards the candidates, and we're going to start with opening statements. And we'll start with you, Incumbent Perri Freeman.
Thank you, Seth. Yep, so my name is Perri Freeman. I'm the City Councilor for the Central District. One of my main goals as a City Councilor and getting involved in local politics was to really make city governance and our local spaces as inclusive and equitable as possible. It's important that people who have been historically marginalized and vulnerable in our community are at the center of policymaking. That's something I've really strived for. Largely I've passed policy around the climate emergency was something I worked on. I also was helpful in crafting the reparations task force, which is now underway. And I was also very much involved in the work towards building a new oversight for police discipline, and have also focused sort of on general policing issues as well. And going forward, issues around livable wages will be something that I want to focus on, continuing to mitigate the climate crisis, as well as thinking about solutions for, how to make Burlington truly affordable. So I really appreciate your time tonight, and yeah, thank you.
Great. Next up, we'll welcome an opening statement from Tiki.
Thank you very much. So my name is Tiki Archambeau. I live on Crombie Street in the Old North End. I have been here 20 years. It landed here after traveling in search of the best place to live, right? And just found Burlington really felt like home to me. And when all the events lined up after we got here, it just made a lot of sense that, we knew we made the right decision. Really contented and active throughout all those years, doing a lot of neighborhood things. Started the Crombie Street Fest, which turned into the Old North End Ramble. Been on CDBG grant boards. I'm currently on the Public Works Commission, been on it for 9 years, 3 of which I chaired. So, try to stay active. I think rather contented all these years, except now just feeling like I have enough concerns that it's worth throwing my hat, and just want to give people another choice in this race here, and try to strive towards a Burlington that just feels like a Burlington that, our neighborhoods have come to enjoy. So thank you for the introduction.
Thank you, Tiki. Now we'll move to Peggy Luhrs.
I'm Peggy Luhrs, and my will work for my neighbors, not for a party. And I will work for a sustainable community and truly low-income housing. And I also am extremely concerned about our city being prepared for the future and the built environment. I've been a builder. I have graduate studies in ecological design and ecological economics, and I don't see enough attention being paid to that because this is our future and we're not meeting it. We're you know, the current mayor is kind of repeating, you know, it's gotten us into developments that are all about developer switches, and I think we need to serve the community more. I spent 10 years in City Hall being the director of the Burlington Women's Council. We were named as one of the reasons for the Livable City Award for the city. And I helped get do a lot of work for women in the trades and get that started. It was Step Up for Women. It's now Vermont Works for Women, but that was all started with the Women's Council in conjunction with the Community Economic Development Office. And I know some of the poorest people in our city are women, particularly single moms. So I would still like to see programming that helps out women in those situations. I support racial justice and I support demilitarizing our police. Okay.
Thank you, Peggy. Thanks, candidates, for staying on time. As we said, we have a very active phone line today. Lots of folks interested in this race. So we'll turn right to the phone lines and Aiden in studio. Do we have our first question?
Militarizing our police.
Okay. Hi, I'm Betsy Allen Puttenbaker. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I am calling with a question for the candidates. Perri, you have a prominent video on your campaign Facebook page that shows you chanting "All police have got to go" while you're marching down the street. For all the candidates, I'm wondering if you support disarming police and/or abolishing police altogether, or do you support a more reform-minded approach that combines considerations for both racial justice and public safety? And can you share your distinctions also between activism and policymaking? Thanks.
Great. So Perri, since you were evoked in the caller's comments and also the incumbent, give you an opportunity to answer first.
Sure, thank you. I'm gonna set my own timer too so I don't go over time. Yeah, thank you for calling in and asking this question. There is a long history of folks being in elected office who have taken place in social movements in the course of in our history. Some that come to mind that I really admire. Cori Bush, for example, was just elected to the House of Representatives, has stood with Black Lives Matter activists. Kamala Harris, who's our vice president, has stood with Black Lives Matter protests. That chant in particular is not one that I particularly recall. Do I stand in solidarity with that movement? Absolutely. And I feel like marching in the streets with folks is an example of that solidarity. And just because I'm an elected official doesn't mean I'm going to renounce my solidarity with social movements, which often come from a place of disenfranchised power and looking to address those issues. Sorry, there were many facets, so let me get to the other ones. In terms of reform versus abolition, this is a question that's come up a lot lately because there are ways in which reform measures have come under criticism. I think at this point, we're taking a multifaceted approach. The oversight policy on police discipline is a reform measure. I worked very, very hard on that. There is no one who is in an abolition movement that would say that that was an abolitionist policy. I think if you're talking about reducing firearms, this is such a long question, so I feel like I'm going to go over reducing firearms or reducing the size of the department. I think those are more in the vein of abolition, and I think do speak to a history and a tradition of looking at ways in which we can move beyond a community that it is where public safety moves beyond the need for police. I think we are having conversations about the need for a multifaceted approach. I'm out of time, so thank you for the question.
We'll try to circle back to this issue a bit later. Peggy Luhrs, would you like to pick up the caller's question next?
Sure. I did work with the police one for the 10 years that I was in the City Hall, and we managed to do some amazing things, like get a woman into the police department who would check over all of the domestic violence responses from the Burlington Police Department and upgraded them. I will call for demilitarizing the police. I think the federal government sending all kinds of military equipment to the police is something we don't need. And I would call for diversifying the police budget so that there's part of the budget would go to more like social workers and other people who could handle people with mental illness problems and things like that, where there's been some really violent response from the police because they don't know, this is not a situation they know how to handle. I think the police need to be trained better so they don't take a militarized response, and I think it would be fine to diversify the budget so that part of it could go to a different kind of response team. That's worked really well in some other cities. And I certainly think it could work in Burlington. And I would say that my experience with the Burlington police is, there's a mixed bag. There were good police officers, and I think one of our main police problems is that when there is a bad apple, the police tend to surround them rather than make them accountable. So I would look for some community response on accountability in our police department.
Great, thank you, Peggy. Tiki Archambeau, we'll go to you next. We will actually ask if candidates could mute themselves, as Perri brought up earlier. That would be great. We are getting a little bit of feedback on the line. Thank you.
Oh, you all good, Seth? Okay. Yeah, so, this is getting all the energy in the room, right? What I think is really important is that recognizing first and foremost, we have a lot of common ground in Burlington right now. I don't know that I've heard from anyone who does not agree with reform or accountability or racial justice. Burlington's unique in that sense. We don't face the same struggles that so many other cities are right now. And here we are divided, and it kind of it's confounding to me in a way that we could be so divided right now when we all have such common ground. So I suppose the devil is in the details, right? I look at the timeline, for example, of this council, including Councilor Freeman, in cutting the police budget last summer, 30% without a plan. That was concerning to me. I want to note that if we follow that timeline along, that only now, just now, an RFP went out to develop that plan. And then Monday night, the council dug in its heels and said, well, we know that the cap should be 74, for example. We can't tinker with that. There's not even a plan on the table. So I have to question what's going on. In some way, there's basic governance that has to be covered. And again, we're all open-minded, like, great, let's get this plan together. Let's get the consultants. I'm eager to hear what they have to say. Outside opinions are important, but you don't slash and burn before you have that plan in place. What happens when you do that? Well, you create fear in a community. That's exactly what we have right now. We talk about unintended consequences. You have the fire department submitted a memo to the council saying they will be unable to provide overnight services if the police do the same, because they will not report to a lot of the calls without police. Makes sense. So we're starting to see a domino effect already. And I get it, there's going to be data cited that, oh, well, our overnight calls are low and there's nothing going on. Well, yeah, because we're in a pandemic, right? Everything's really pretty chill right now. But we're a town where we have festivals. We have a growing city population every fall with the university. In summary, again, I'm not averse to reform or ideas. I think even the police are into that. We got to set realistic expectations for the officers before we move forward here. So that's my vision. Thank you.
Great. Thank you all.
Point of information.
Yes.
What's the process for rebuttals? Is it just as requested, or?
We can provide up to 30 seconds for a rebuttal, yes.
For any, unlimited?
Yes, yeah, that's fine. Well, we would stop each of you after doing one, but yes, you can each take an additional 30 seconds if there's an issue with the other candidate's response, if you like.
But we can only have one rebuttal, or we can.
You can evoke it on each issue if you
Oh,
so
wow,
choose.
that's a lot. Can I quickly just respond?
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I there are issues in the language around the fact that like what the council did in June created fear, or what is happening now has divided us, when Black and brown people in the city have been living in fear for a very long time because of data and statistics that show that the police department does not fairly and equitably treat those members of our community the same as white folks. So it's frustrating that now that we're moving forward with changing things, people are saying, well, I don't feel safe and this is fearful and this is dividing us, when that was already the case. And we need public safety for everyone, not just folks who have the power to feel safe in the system that we already have. Thank you.
Any further rebuttals? Yes, Tiki.
Yeah, please. I'll try to make it short. So yeah, no doubt. I understand our BIPOC community is negatively impacted. And so what we've done is we've traded their safety for the safety of women, for example, who are afraid to go out at night, especially when there's talk of cutting that third shift. So whose safety exactly is more important at this point? Are we going to choose one community over another? I get it that, I mean, I think we can do both. I think we can protect both populations. They're both worth it. Let's just have a plan. That's all I'm saying. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Great. Thank you all very much. We'll now turn back towards the call. And Aiden, I believe we have another caller on hold. Go ahead, caller.
Yes, hi. I would like to know how your background will inform your judgment on the council, and if you could please explain paying rent, childcare, supporting family members, and struggling to obtain financial stability in that background. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. Peggy Luhrs, we'll start with you this time. Oh, Peggy, I'm sorry, you're muted.
I did not catch that question completely. What was he asking? I heard family, jobs, but I didn't hear what he was.
I think the general sense was how would your lived experience influence your role as a policymaker, including your personal history in terms of the work you've done with.
My lived experience is that I have lived here since 1977 in the Old North End, that I have been low income through most of that, even when I was the director of the council in City Hall. And I really feel like I know what people struggle with here. My other experience is 10 years in City Hall working on programs focused on women. You know, Vermont to this day, right now, I just learned that we are 8th in the nation in terms of the amount of women in the state who are killed by their partners. So that's not a statistic we want to be proud of. And it seems like to some people, the whole issue of you know, what goes on for women is off the chart. So I'm always concerned for that. I'm concerned for, I also have graduate studies in ecological design. I'm very concerned about, you know, that there's a lot we can do in building to prepare for the future. There are things that could be done to that city, palace, place, whatever. You know, we could be doing like the city of Chicago does, insisting that every new building of size has a green roof. So those are so I have experience as a carpenter. So I feel like I'm a practical person, a problem solver, and an innovator. And the Women's Council did a lot of innovative programs. We helped out, we got housing for single moms. We got the whole women in the trades thing rolling. We did forums every year. We way back then had a diversity film series to educate the community about some of the racial justice issues here. And I guess that's enough.
Thank you, Peggy. Perri Freeman, we'll go to you next.
Great, thank you so much. Yeah, this is an important question. You know, I felt like I've really been thinking about this a lot lately this last year. For a while, I was, probably the lowest earner on the council, which was something that I knew, still a renter, but also this year have been frontline worker, which has been pretty considerably impacting my life and those that I work with. So I think in terms of, speaking towards economic issues around, being a renter or making ends meet, I think things like low wages, renting, the rent being so high, those are things that I think about a lot. And I try to bring that into the policy that I'm making, on city council. It directly influences that. I think, going forward with the impact of COVID on frontline workers, but not just on frontline workers, on families, on older folks, on people of color. I think we really need to center folks who have been most disproportionately impacted. And I mean, ultimately all of us have been impacted, but also thinking, about folks who've been really severely impacted by this and how we're going to recover going forward and how we are going to be able to partner with state and federal agencies to make sure that relief and recovery is equitable and gets to the people who've been hit the hardest. I could speak more towards some other things. I went over time on the last one, so maybe I'll keep this one a little bit brief. But absolutely, I think that's a really important thing, and I think it's important in this district to bring those experiences into policymaking because it impacts so many people in this district.
Thank you, Perri. And now Tiki, we'll move to you.
Yeah, thank you. Well, gosh, what a good question, right? Because we're all sort of an accumulation of our experiences through life. And I look back on my life, originally born in Michigan, grew up in a rural area, and then my parents divorced. And the classic story, the mom gets stuck with the kids and finds herself in poverty, right? And Peggy kind of spoke to that earlier. So that was my childhood, is bouncing around from apartment to apartment, finding a new school each year, facing my share of bullies, and the school of life, I suppose you could say, in coming up. I did, I recognize I'm not in the same situation as those who are disadvantaged in their community, especially minorities, right? So I recognize my white maleness gave me a leg up over others. At the same time, I did learn the value of work and a work ethic, and that I consider myself a hard worker today. And I think that's important because there's so many lessons in that come with, I guess, growing up in that lifestyle that I really hold on to today. So working hard is just key, right? Work, earn your dollars, and also live below your means, right? Easier said than done. I get it. There's situations like high rents, people paying 50% of their incomes, but it's still possible. Honoring your word, know your neighbor, and honoring the neighbor. Getting to know folks like that. So just lessons that have brought me to a place where I was able to scrape through, menial jobs like dishwashing and cooking as a kid to now I'm overseeing a team of folks around the world, and building intelligence reports. So I consider myself blessed in that regard. And I'm just, I feel just so fortunate in life to be where I am and recognize all that had to happen to bring me to this point. So it's an important lesson that I learned through growing up poor.
Good timing. Great. Let's move back towards, there will be your election on the ballot. What other ballot items will voters see this year? What are some of the other 6 initiatives on the city ballot, and what stands out to you and why? And can you quickly discuss, I know it's 6 items, but can you quickly discuss your positions on those ballot questions?
Who's that for, Seth?
Sorry about that. We'll start with you this time, Tiki. It's your turn to start first.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Wow, I'll go through them all. So I know ahead of time, just so everyone knows, you would kind of run this idea by us, is there one most important? Tough choice, because a lot of consequential ballot items. I'm going to say my number 1 pick is the school budget. That is our future, the schools. Without that, We don't have a solid foundation in our community. We don't have a future in Burlington. People will not move here without strong schools. And I just look at the Burlington High School situation and just feel like we as a community failed the students at Burlington High School. I feel awful that both the teachers and the staff who work in the high school had to put up with the PCBs, perhaps unknowingly, and that they're effectively out of a place. Now, I'm so glad to see the Macy's temporary situation working out, so I'm putting schools at the top. I know there's a lot of issues, but I have to mention that. I'm going to say a close number 2 for me would be the just cause issue. Again, with this theme of this current council, I fear unintended consequences here. Rents will increase. Apartment conditions will deteriorate. These are the 2 leading items in this town that we don't want. It's already high rents and poor conditions in apartments. This is going to exacerbate that. How's it going to do it? Because it's going to force property owners to honor leases in perpetuity. So the renters who have a bad neighbor, for example, and when I say bad neighbor, what do I mean? The drug dealers living in the apartment next door, the sexual predators, as testified even in a subcommittee where Councilor Freeman was on. These folks now are being protected by the just cause. And it's curious to me that this is never mentioned. All we hear is about unfair evictions where, in fact, we have leases in place, we have courts in place. So I'm going to leave that aside for now. The other ballot items, my gosh, loaded question. I don't know. I suspect we're going to talk about those in time. So I'll just stop there and say, yeah, thank you.
Great. Councilor Freeman, you're up next.
Thank you. Okay, so I think the most important one for me, at least, that jumps out the most is the just cause eviction item, which is item number. Ooh, I'm gonna say it. It's item number 5. And I think it's misleading to say that rents will go up, that apartments will become destitute. That's incorrect. It's not supported by evidence. Just cause eviction, it is essential protection for renters. There was a bipartisan support from this on council. It passed 9-3 that created exemptions around some of the initial concerns, which were around, what if I own a duplex, triplex, what does that mean for me? In terms of, sexual predation and, violent neighbors, no one supports those things. It doesn't mean that we also don't protect renters through a policy like just cause eviction. I think it's absolutely essential for this community. I think a second, feels pretty strongly about is ranked choice voting. That I think will just bring sort of essential well-being to our governance. It's just a better voting practice. It's one that I've supported and advocated for a long time. I will just go through the other ones as well, just to give a summary. The first one, of course, yes, on the school budget. 2 on the airport commissioners, I will also be voting yes. 3 on the regulating of thermal energy systems, I will be voting yes. 4, as I said, I'll be supporting yes. I'm actually yes for I think all of them. 6 is just cause evictions. 5 is just cause evictions. 6 is retail cannabis, which is a yes. And then on the advisory question around decarbonization, I'm also a yes. So thank you.
Perfectly timed. Peggy Luhrs, ballot questions.
Yes, I'm going to say that the third one interests me a lot. The idea of that the city would do more to regulate thermal heating in the city, because as I've said, I'm quite concerned about what we can do with our built environment to prepare for what's coming that we seem to be pretending isn't coming. So I'm very in favor of that. I'm also think it would be only fair for there to be someone from Winooski on the airport commission, given the fact that Winooski is incredibly impacted by these F-35s. I was in one of the earliest groups opposing the F-35s. I still do, even though they're here. I think they have, destroyed a lot of livability for a lot of people. And I guess I support most of the ballot items. Trying to see here. I support the I wish our school budget went more to this, went a little bit less than it does to administrative salaries. I keep seeing really high administrative salaries at the university and at the schools, and I'd like to see teachers rewarded more and other programs. But so what are the and on the cannabis one, yes, I support it, although I would like to see, I don't think there's any reason to do advertising for cannabis. We don't need to push it. But since it's legal, you know, and the ranked choice, I support the ranked choice. I think we did that for a little while and some people objected to, but I think it is a good system. And the charter change, I'm not sure about the just cause, because I think that, you know, I've seen both sides of it and it can be difficult. So I'm not really totally sure where I stand on that. It seems like it's a little bit, we already have some pretty good, okay.
Thank you, Peggy. Next up, we're going to turn back to the caller line, and we welcome you, caller. Go ahead, caller. You're online with the candidates.
Thanks very much for the opportunity to ask this question. Councilor Freeman's charter change voting proposal to create a police oversight review panel and a biased police control panel failed this past January. The Joint Committee of the Public Safety Committee and Police Commission that Perri serves on was created last summer and charged with making recommendations on how to build a safe and healthy community. I asked Perri what are some of the recommendations this joint committee has offered to the City Council to build a safe and healthy community since the committee was created 7.5 months ago. I'll ask Tiki and Peggy, what are your visions for a safe and healthy community? Thanks very much.
And caller, if you don't mind sharing your name and the town that you're from.
I'm sorry, my name is Bob Kienan. I'm in Ward 3. What was the other part of your question?
You got it. Perfect.
Okay.
So now we'll turn. Perri, you're up first, so you can go ahead and answer that question since it was also directed at you.
Thank you. Yeah, I thought it was unfortunate that the oversight policy charter change was vetoed. It did have 7 votes at the council, but not enough to stand against a veto. And that was unfortunate. I think that was the right move. In terms of accountability, it was something that I had hoped to work on. There was a lot of public support around it. And I was really dismayed because I think that would have been a considerable effort towards progress on this issue. Regarding the joint committee, I do serve on the joint committee. There are 10 of us. It's the 7 police commissioners and the 3 members of the public safety committee that has been meeting. We have now 1 consultant that has been contracted through, it took, just considerable amount of time for the RFPs and these sort of things. And they are now contracted with the city to do a community engagement project that was intentionally prioritized, sort of a little bit, not, much time in between them, but at least slightly before the audit, which is now, we are working towards finalizing the contract with that consultant, and that audit, some of the first results should be coming back by April. So the community engagement is meant to, contract is meant to, with that consultant is meant to also inform and help sort of do some of the work that the audit will also be doing. I've heard, the caller's not the first person to be frustrated about the timeline. Unfortunately, these things just, they just take time. We are working on them. And I anticipate that there will be traction and recommendations within the next several months. So,
thank you, Councilor Freeman. Peggy Luhrs, we'll go to you next.
Okay, so the question was to the rest of us in general about the community. Well, the issue of childcare is an interesting one because that has been a tremendous problem in this city forever and in this country forever. And it really is, really makes life difficult for particularly single moms, but for all kinds of parents and, you know, single dads. There was a proposal back when I was in City Hall for a small tax to go to that, and I guess they proposed it, but they never actually ran it. I think that would not be a bad idea because there needs to be a lot more support. From what I have read, almost most of the jobs that have been lost during the lockdown have been women's jobs because though we claim that, you know, there's some equality, there really isn't. It really tends to fall to women to do the childcare, and there has never been enough. And every other developed country in the world has childcare and, you know, and parental leave for both parents, and we need to be catching up with that. And that's always been a really tough issue in this neighborhood.
Thank you, Peggy. And Tiki, going back maybe to the caller's initial question as well.
Yeah, thank you. Want to just express my amazement and really why I'm here, right? A big motivator at Councilor Freeman's response to that, which is that there is no plan, that cuts were made without a plan. We're just now RFPing this. Imagine what that is like to be in the community and to hear this, which is basically, trust me. You know, again, I don't think Councilor Freeman is evil or anything like that. You know, I'm sure there is a lot of good intentions there, but trust me, doesn't work when you're cutting the police. This is a community that we've had for ages. You know, my neighbors who I talk to all the time now, who I've been around for 20 years, I get to know a lot of people. And yeah, that's not okay with this community that is the Old North End and downtown. A lot of people have reflected on the old times, the way the Old North End used to be, and say, we don't want to go back to that. We've seen so many improvements over the years. And I remember, you know, things have improved over the years too. I get it. There are people who've been marginalized. I say, let's fix it. So let's offer the more hopeful path here. What am I looking at? Let's revisit use of force. We as a community get to determine what that means. How do we visit this? So we need to set proper expectations for the officers, because even they are saying, well, what do you expect of us? And it's unclear. We also need to review interdiction, which is honoring requests from other agencies. So a lot of times, you know, maybe it's another police agency says, hey, we had a lead that there's an arrest warrant out for someone in your town. Can you go arrest them? You know, so we need to take a look at that, because that will reflect on our own statistics about, you know, racial disparities. We need, if anyone who's been in this town for a long time might remember a guy named Justin Verrett, big teddy bear of a guy who was amazing at working with mental health care issues. He started with Spectrum. My wife worked there for a time, and then went on to the police and helped divert a lot of the mental health calls from the police. And he was just a natural at it. We need a lot of Justin Verretts in the police department. So I think this step, you know, the Murad proposal, you know, was a step in that direction, but we do need to raise that cap. Lastly, and I know I'm right up against it, but we need to honor the police commission and give them a direct role in departmental oversight. I think what we had was a reinvention of something that already exists. And we can empower this current commission who has full of intelligent people to do this. And I'm sorry to go over.
Thank you. Perri Freeman would like a rebuttal.
Thank you. I think it's inaccurate to say that there wasn't a plan. The plan was to reinvest resources into services that would better suit the community in terms of safety. That's what we want, is safety and reduction of violence. Unfortunately, I think there's been a lot of fear mongering around this issue that has gotten us away from what actually keeps us safe. I also, you know, use of force is great to talk about, but when you don't have accountability measures like oversight and like reevaluating the union contract, which are not things that I've heard, you know, anyone else, you know, running for the seat talk about, those things are necessary. And so we need real policy changes. And that's what I would like to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other candidates rebuttals for 30 seconds? So seeing and hearing none, we'll move back to the callers we have online. And I believe we have 1 or 2 more calls and about 10 minutes probably to go. So caller, we welcome you to the studio. And by the studio, I mean our homes.
taking my call.
If you can just be sure to state your name and what town you're from, we appreciate that.
Yes, my name is Matt. I'm from Ward 2. This question is for Councilor Freeman. In April of last year, one of the first COVID relief packages, the CARES Act, brought $8.7 million to the Burlington Airport in free money. That guaranteed the operations of our airport and prevented about 50 families from being thrown into poverty. Yet you voted against that $8.7 million grant. Can you explain your vote? And to our other two candidates, can you share how you would have voted on that grant vote?
Councilor Freeman, since your name was evoked, you can start, and then we'll move to Tiki Archambeau and then Peggy Luhrs.
Sure, yeah, thank you for bringing up this question. I have spoken before about my concerns about the airport expansion. It's not something that's very popular or discussed in Burlington, in Vermont, or even really in the US. We have really pretty much a culture of hyper-dependence around it. I don't fly. I have made a choice not to fly because it is unfortunately, at this point, it just creates so much pollution. I understand that there might be at times essential reasons to fly, but the majority of air flight is for luxury, and it's also mostly done by people of higher means. It's not something that is really accessible even to lower or working class folks. So I have stated publicly, I don't have the appetite to expand the airport at this time. My vote on that particular issue was around that and having consistency on that. I think that, when I've talked about it with other counselors, I think, ultimately it would be great to have a report about this. It was not included in the net zero energy analysis of our sort of greenhouse gas emissions and impact, but it is certainly something that impacts the amount of pollution that we have. I know these are difficult conversations, but when we're talking about moving towards a 6th mass extinction, so actually becoming extinct, on a mass level of species, those are really hard conversations that we actually have to have because it's not worth extinction that just seems actually pretty obvious to me. So thank you for the question. I know it's a really difficult topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Tiki Archambeau.
Yeah, thank you. So I would, that's a layup to me. It's easy. You take that money, right? Free money to address our airport. Yeah, so that's my short answer. You heard it here. I guess none of us should fly because Councilor Freeman doesn't fly. So I will contend that it may be an image in some people's minds that that flying is for the wealthy. I recall vividly working for a Norwich University, my alma mater, earning $10,000 a year, not a lot of salary, and they would send me to fly to recruit because I was in admissions at the time, and they would send me down to other states to go recruiting. So yeah, I can't say I was sitting in first class on that one, right? There's many reasons that people fly. We're a global economy. We rely on airplanes. They're just a part of what makes the world go round, so to speak, economically. No doubt climate change is an issue. So I get that. At the same time, if we're going to be serious about it, then let's go all radical, right? Let's ban all cars from Burlington. Let's ban the planes. Let's ban all fossil fuels. Let's just go all in, right? I mean, to me, I think there should be more honesty in this than what we're seeing at this point. The airport serves a vital function for us in terms of travelers coming to and from Vermont. Tourism industry drives, it's a multi-billion-dollar revenue generator for the state. And yeah, airplanes are not ideal. I also know that there's a startup here in Vermont of looking to electrify airplanes. So, there are strides being made. It's not like it's right around the corner where we'll have electric airplanes, for example, but we live in such an innovative community with an entrepreneurial spirit. It's that Vermont independence, that smallness of us, of just striving out and making a go of it and using our intellectual resources for the betterment of everything. So we're doing the right things. I don't think it's the right thing to ban planes, and I think we should have taken that money. Thank you.
Great, Peggy Luhrs.
Okay, well, I wish I knew more exactly what the money was for and who the 50 families that are losing jobs were. It might have an effect on my answer. In general, I am not for expanding airports. I'm not for closing them down or saying no flying yet, but I also agree that we are facing a tremendous climate change, and flying is one of the most carbon heavy things you can do. So and I've watched the airport keep expanding, and I watched the amount of cars sitting there keep expanding, and we have to go to less cars, we have to go to less flying, we have to go to less of a lot of things that we've gotten very, very used to, and that depend on carbon fuels, and electricity doesn't solve that either. It helps, but it isn't, we don't really have a solution. We really have to live on a different scale, and we're very unwilling to do that. Or maybe we're not so unwilling, we don't know, because I feel like we're constantly propagandized by media that wants to sell us stuff. So the thing that would give me hesitation was a lot of people losing jobs, but I'm not really, I would not be pro expanding our airport. It's expanded quite a bit since I've lived here and seen it, and it just brings more carbon and more cars in there too. And I think when we've destroyed housing with the F-35s, which was a horrible decision on the part of our congressional delegation, every one of them stuck together to little Patrick Leahy's ego project.
Thank you, Peggy. We've got one more caller on the line. So I'd like to shift to that caller, give each candidate about a minute, maybe 45 seconds to respond to the caller, and then we'll try to give everybody a couple of seconds to wrap up tonight. So caller, we'll turn to you and welcome your question. And this question will start with you, Peggy.
Okay, this is my wrap-up question, or?
No, we're hoping for a caller is going to pop on. We've got somebody on hold.
Kevin from Ward 3. I just wondering if we could talk a little bit more about how you would fight climate change, touching on some other aspects of life, like, heating in homes, bike lane policy, and I think we covered the airport pretty well, but the other two, be interested to hear your thoughts on how you'd want to tackle climate change.
No, it's tough, but if you could each keep your answers to 1 minute, we'll start with Peggy, go to Tiki, and then finish with Perri.
Okay, well, my experience and my emphasis is on the built environment, because I have been building passive solar since I got to Vermont. And so I feel like we can do a lot with that. There's a lot we can do to mitigate the water, the cleanliness of the lake that we're not doing. And I think we really need to be focusing on these things. I don't know about eating at home. It might, there were some innovative ideas by actually feminists like Charlotte Perkins Gill, where there would be a community cafeteria, and I saw some of that go on in Holland, and that's kind of nice. It's a social thing, and it feeds people, and feeding people in that way is more economical than each little house. So the built environment's a lot of it, cutting back on fossil fuels. In the city, those are the things you can deal with. You can't deal with taking away the oil company subsidies. That's on the federal level, but okay.
We'll jump to Tiki.
Yeah, thanks. Great question, right? Solve climate change in 2 minutes. So this is one of those issues that it underlies the theme of my whole campaign, which is teamwork. I know that it sounds a little cliche, but what does that mean? Because climate change will not be tackled by Burlington alone. We have to adapt and grow partners in this relationship here and make that happen. It's not to be understated, right? Because we have to sell our ideas to the rest of the surrounding communities and perhaps beyond. We're known as a progressive community, and I think we can generate those great ideas. I mentioned, the startup looking at electrification of airplanes as an example. So number one, again, part of that teamwork example is, oh geez, we're at 1 minute of these. you break down a problem, you identify it. Let's look at the biggest contributors to global warming, and then try to look at a carrot versus the stick approach, right? Like there was initial penalty offered on homeowners who had efficient furnaces. That's a stick, and I don't think that's the way to go to sell this thing. Thank you.
Great, we'll jump to Perri.
Thank you. Yeah, this is why I love the Green New Deal structure. I think it's good to think of, because the last question regarding the airport, we talked about loss of jobs, and we can't pit loss of jobs around a sustainable economy. And so, you know, moving towards jobs that are going to be good for workers and well-paying, but also are not jobs in sectors that produce a lot of greenhouse gas emissions, I think will be essential. I think that also means expanding you know, walking and biking infrastructure. It also means expanding public transit, making that as affordable as possible. You know, we've had free transit during COVID. You know, that's something that I've supported. How can we continue to see that so that it's not an economic issue? These climate solutions, you know, there's the weatherization policies I think are very good. We're looking at district energy from McNeil. So, you know, I have some questions about the biomass aspect, but, you know, how can that mitigate in terms of the built environment? I think those are some of the ways that we can move forward. And I understand that there's a desire around entrepreneurial spirit, but I think we really need to be bold going forward.
Great. So unfortunately, we've got to wrap up tonight's forum on a quick note. We really appreciate you all joining us. Obviously, Burlingtonians have a difficult decision to make and are grateful for your willingness to serve. So thank you, candidates, and thanks for abiding by our rules today. Sorry we didn't get the closing statements, but know you'll have opportunities to commute with the public outside of this. And again, this is brought to you today by Town Meeting Television. We encourage you to continue to tune in for forums, stay engaged, and remember March 2nd to get out and vote, or come up with a voting plan early and make sure you engage with your town clerk and get that ballot in as soon as you can in a safe way. Thank you for joining us this evening. This has been brought to you by Town Meeting TV. Thank you, candidates.
Thanks to Channel 17.
Thank you.
Good evening and welcome to Town Meeting Television. I'm Seth Leonard. We'll be moderating today's discussion with Burlington City Council candidates for the North District. Joining me today will be Mark Barlow, who's an independent, and Kienan Christianson, who's a Democrat and progressive. And Kienan's also obviously our incumbent tonight. We will be moving into the forum to illuminate you all as voters of what's coming to you in a ballot on Tuesday, March the 2nd, 2021. Remember town meeting days, that time when all Vermonters go to the polls to vote on local issues, local candidates, and town meeting television's your opportunity to connect with those candidates and issues beforehand. And if you're watching from home, you can be engaged tonight. You can call in at 802-862-3966. Again, that's 802-862-3966 with any questions that you may have. Please note that when you do call in, each candidate will have an opportunity to answer your question. And remember, you can stay tuned to Town Meeting Television all throughout election season on Comcast channel 1087, Burlington Telecom 17 and 217, as well as watching Town Meeting TV's YouTube page. So for Mark and Keenan, a couple ground rules for tonight. Candidates are going to have a 1-minute open statement telling us why they should be the candidate that you all elect March 2nd. All candidates will have 2 minutes to respond to either studio questions or callers on the phone. There may be questions from the public, so we will be spending probably a lot of our time on the phone lines tonight. And each candidate can also ask or provide a rebuttal if they're revoked or they have something to say to the way the candidate answered another comment. And then we'll hope to get to 30-second closing comments. So with that, I'm excited to welcome Mark Barlow and Kienan Christianson. And Mark, we'll start with you for opening statements on why Burlington voters should elect you.
Well, thank you for having me tonight, Seth. One correction though, this is an open seat. It's being left open by Franklin Polino and there is no incumbent in this seat. So I'll start by saying, I think it's safe to say that Keenan and I are both committed to our community, agree that the new North End is a great place, maybe the best place in the city to live. And the building community and connections in our neighborhoods is really important. But in this city council election, voters have a clear choice. If you like the way that Max Tracy and the progressive majority have been governing on the city council, then Keenan is probably the candidate that deserves your vote. But if you have concerns about the way the city council has been governing, the initiatives brought forward, the recent decisions the council has made, then I hope you consider voting for me. If elected, I will not rubber stamp the agenda items of interest groups or political parties. I'll insist on involving all stakeholders in any issues, and I'll promise to make the hard decisions when needed. I'll also always try to do what's best for Burlington. If you support me, you may not always agree with me or the way I vote on a particular issue, but I promise I'll always listen carefully, look at all the relevant information, and consider all points of view before I make my decisions. Thanks.
Thank you, Mark and Keenan. And apologies, made you incumbent, but we'll move to you next for opening statements.
Well, I appreciate the compliment, but I'm so excited to be here. Thank you all for hosting us. And you know, the reason why you should vote for me as your next city councilor is because I've got the skills, the experience, and the enthusiasm to make sure that we get through this pandemic and that as we move through it, we're not leaving neighbors behind, we're bringing them with us. You know, 2 years ago, when people were telling me, we need a community dinner, we need something to bring people together, I got to work to get that done. When legal aid came to me and said, hey, we've got incarcerated moms who are having trouble seeing their kids, can you help? I got me and my lawyer friends together to figure out a solution and provide a free legal clinic. When I found out that there was a number of individuals in our town who were not getting access to legal advice and they were survivors of domestic and sexual violence, I stepped up and started volunteering at Steps to End Domestic Violence because community service and community engagement is important to me, and it's important that we continue to work together. I'm in this to win it, and I'm in it to represent you because I care about all of you, and I'm committed to making sure that as we move through this pandemic, we're going to get through it and we're going to come out stronger afterwards.
Timing, great. So now we'll move to the phones where we have a caller in waiting with a question. Go ahead, caller, and if you can be sure to start with your name and where you live in the city or the town you live in, we appreciate that.
Okay, yeah, sure. My name is Springer Harris, and I live in the New North End of Burlington, Ward 4. And my question is, Keenan, according to the campaign finance reports, you and your spouse have financially supported Max Tracy with multiple donations totaling $600. And despite Max's repeated votes to fund police. You've also done lit drops with him, and you claim to have made small donations to Ali because he's your friend. Why do you support Max Tracy, who has led the effort to defund the police? And Mark, you have voiced support for Moreau. You have a sign in your yard for him. Why do you support Moreau?
Great. So for this question, we'll start with Kienan first.
Yeah, so this has been such an interesting race for me because we have three really fantastic candidates. And I'm really good friends with two of them. I really appreciate Ali. I really think that he's a great community builder. I think that Max Tracy's bringing some bold ideas, and I think that Moreau's got some experience to get things done. And, for me, this policing issue is not an unsolvable problem. I know, Springer, you and I served together on the Development Review Board, and finding solutions and coming together is what you and I have always done on the Development Review Board. And, when we're talking about policing, what I'm really excited about is we have an opportunity to really rethink how we go about public safety. Of course, we want to make sure that we've got the night shift covered. To answer the question that I'm sure is coming, yes, I would have voted to increase the police staffing because, we really need to make sure that we have the appropriate public safety. But as we move past that, let's start talking about what Denver's doing with their STAR program, how they have reduced calls, how they've gotten more community engagement, more public health officials out to help individuals with mental health crises, and how they've had zero use of force incidents in the entire year since they implemented that program. That seems like a solid idea that we in Burlington should be doing. And I really appreciate Robin Friedman McGuire who brought this to my attention. This is going to be a fantastic program. And if you're interested in it, there'll actually be a forum on February 17th from 6 to 7:30 p.m. I encourage you to reach out. It's hosted by Cahoots. I think it's going to be a great, interesting way for continuing the conversation about how we move forward on public safety, and that we do so in a way that makes sure that we're addressing the underlying issues that neighbors have brought before us.
Really, Mark, we'll go to you.
Sure. Thanks for the question, Springer. I'm supporting Moreau because I think that he is the most experienced candidate. He's managed the financial management of the city has been done very well by him. He's also the candidate that I believe can do the best for getting us out of the COVID crisis. I think that he's done a great job so far with the Resource and Recovery Center and some of the other initiatives we've had for COVID. I'd also like to follow up though on your question, just with a comment that I didn't hear Keenan answer, which was you and your spouse donated $600 to the Max Tracy campaign, and on his campaign finance report, he returned $250 of that money, and I was curious if you could elaborate on why that was.
Yeah, so we've donated $300 to both candidates, and as far as the strikeout, I haven't gotten the money back, so I think that it's just you'll have to talk to Max Tracy's campaign. But as I said, what really excites me about this mayor race, and what I really hope people remember, is that we've got three really good candidates. And it's easy to say, oh, well, I support this person for that reason, or I support this person for that reason. But let's not forget, there are parts of the country where they don't have choices like this, where they don't have good candidates running for public office, where they've got, like for my sister, for example, she's got Trump Republican and Diet Trump Republican. And I'm really grateful that we've got three wonderful people standing up. And I know that the mayor's race feels like a big deal and feels like, there's a lot of energy into it. But remember that we're neighbors, and that, regardless of who our mayor is, we all got to work together. And I'm committed to working with whoever the next mayor is.
Thank you. Your rebuttal?
I have nothing more.
So, seeing and hearing none, we'll move back to the phones. I believe we have another caller in queue. Caller, if you can share your name and the town you live in, please.
Sure, great. Thank you so much. My name is Stephanie, and I live in Burlington. Keenan, you say you are running as a Democrat, but in 2019, you ran as a progressive against our current Democratic City Councilor, Franklin Polino. This year, you were already on the ballot as a progressive when you ran against a well-qualified professional Black woman for the Democratic nomination, successfully keeping her off the ballot. At this important moment of reckoning with racial justice, why would you seek to deny the voters of the New North End the option to vote for a well-qualified Black woman candidate, Karen Durfee, when you were already on the ballot as a progressive? Mark, which party will you align with and work with on the council? Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Stephanie. So what I love about this question is that the thing about democracy is that people get to vote and people get to participate. You know, I actually ran as an independent last time, and I actually sought the Democratic endorsement last time, and the city committee just chose over the voters who voted in the New North End to endorse Franklin. But for me, I decided to run because I really am and envision a Democratic Party that works together with the Progressive Party. I believe that when people are coming together, when we find solutions, when we reach out to our neighbors, regardless of their political affiliations, we get better results, and we tamp down on the partisan rhetoric that we see at the national level. And you know, I'm really excited that so many of our neighbors came out to support me. I mean, 167 people voted for me in the Democratic caucus and 98 voted for me in the Progressive caucus. I mean, that says something that about our community and about our neighborhood, that they really want somebody that will work across party lines and that will continue to help support our neighborhood and will continue to bring people together. And, you know, as a young gay man, I'm really excited to be running for office. You know, 10 years ago, my husband and I couldn't even get married in most of the states. And now we can get married everywhere. And I'm excited to pave the way forward for so many other LGBTQ people to say, if you're willing to step up and run for your community, you don't need to have any special qualifications. If you're gay, if you're trans, please step forward. We need your voice. We need you in government. Don't be afraid to put yourself out there.
Thank you, Keenan. Mark, as an independent, who would you work with on council?
Well, as an independent, and I've always been an independent, I've supported progressives, Democrats, Republicans. I've worked on the campaigns of progressives, Democrats, and Republicans. But in this election, I find myself aligning more with all the Democratic candidates and other contested citywide races. Certainly, I align with Joan Shannon, and she supported me. I've sort of find myself in the conversations I've had with Tiki recently to align with him. And I think we're aligned in our shared concerns over the governance that we've seen from the Progressive Party this last year. The lack of process, the lack of stakeholder engagement, and the sort of agenda-driven policy and initiatives that have come out of the council. And so with that said, who would I caucus with or align with once I got to the council? You know, I have this idea that I wouldn't caucus with anybody and that I would work with everybody because that's what I did when we were on the school board. We didn't have party designations. We didn't have caucuses. We just all sort of worked through problems together. And so when I get to the council, my intention would be to probably seek out the people that I most strenuously disagreed with and then work with them to develop relationships. But in terms of who I align with right now, I would say it's more with the Democrats on the council, just because of the current council makeup.
Yeah, I just got to hop in here with a quick rebuttal. It's convenient that now that we're running in a big race where he thinks that it's good to align with Democrats, he couldn't align with Sarah Carpenter in her race. He supported Kurt Wright over Sarah Carpenter. He supported Kurt Wright over Bob Hooper. I've been working tirelessly to support our Democratic slate. I will be caucusing with the Democrats. And more importantly, I worked hard to help get good Democrats elected. I'm so glad we have Sarah Carpenter on city council because she's got fantastic housing experience and she's done an incredible job making sure that we're getting things done with the experience and know-how that she's brought. I'm really proud to have supported her, and I'm glad that we got her on council.
Well, may I rebut?
30 seconds.
Okay, so I supported Kurt for a long time. Kurt's a friend of mine, and he's also been an outstanding legislator and city councilor and city council president. I think that he couldn't run because of his job at a radio station, but I worked to keep him on the council in that write-in campaign, and I'm very proud of that. We need to have all voices on the council. We have a lot of progressives on the council already. We have a lot of Democrats, but we needed Kurt's voice there as well, and that's why I supported Kurt. And in his race against Bob Hooper, Kurt was a seasoned legislator that had worked on important initiatives we had around education funding and things, and I just didn't want to see that lost. So that's why I've supported Kurt, and I'm proud that I've done so.
Thank you both. And a reminder to folks at home, you can call in at 802-862-3966, so that we will Note that we have 4 folks already in queue, so we'll move to the next caller. Caller, if you can please share your name and what town you're from.
Hi, it's great to talk to Kienan and Mark. Kienan, I believe that you and all the progressive candidates were endorsed by the Democratic Socialist Party. If you are a Democrat, why do you keep seeking other party endorsements? And Mark, for your part, why does it appear you have not sought any other political party endorsement? Thanks.
Good, if you can share your name and what town you're from.
Oh yeah, Dave Schock, and I'm from the New North End of Burlington.
Thank you, Dave.
I'm sorry, Seth, I didn't hear the part of the question from me.
Yeah, the gist of the question was, Kienan, why pursue an endorsement from 2 parties? And Mark, why not pursue an endorsement from a party? And Mark, we'll start with you first.
Okay, so I'm an independent. I've always been an independent. I've never been a member of any political party or run for office in a political party. You know, I think political party adds a layer of, especially at the hyper local level and city government, adds a layer of not distraction, but it becomes sort of an obstacle sometimes to having really meaningful conversations and getting the important work done. So I've chosen to always sort of look for things other than political party when I'm supporting candidates. And it's usually the soft skills, the good listening, collaboration, compromise, ability to sort of come together and agree on what the actual problems and priorities are. And sometimes political parties have certain agendas that sort of drive a lot of the priorities and the decision making. So I've tried to sort of be above that and use that as a secondary consideration. I also think it's important to have all voices at the table. So I like to see a diversity of political view on any deliberative body, as long as they can work together well.
Great. Keenan, Mark says no party. You say yes to 2.
Yeah, I think that's a commitment to who I am and frankly, my ability to bring people together. You know, the benefit of having a political party is it tells voters where your core values are. You know, it says, I'm running as a Democrat and I'm running as a progressive because I value, you know, freedom of expression. I value putting people before profits. I value making sure our environment is cleaned up. I value making sure that our neighbors have participation in government. And I think that when you run as an independent, particularly when you have a history of supporting Republicans over Democrats, I think it's a suspect. And more importantly for me, I've already been tested by the voters. I've won 2 caucuses, and I think that that's a huge indicator of my ability to work with voters to make sure that people feel like their voices are being heard. And I'm proud to have the endorsement of so many other individuals too. I'm one of the first and only city council representatives here in this race to be endorsed by our teachers union. That's huge. They haven't been involved in a political election in almost a decade. And I am proud to have their endorsement because our teachers have been working very hard through this pandemic. They've seen all of the ways that our students have been impacted. And the fact that they're backing me in this race, I'm just so humbled because it says that I've got the skills and the ability to really move us forward. And that's my answer to that. Thank you.
May I rebut?
30 seconds.
So in terms of being tested by the voters, I'll remind Keenan and our television audience or our Zoom audience that I've actually won 2 North District elections as a school commissioner, and I've won them both in contested races. And as far as the teachers union endorsement goes, I just wonder, I know they haven't supported a city council candidate before, but your campaign treasurer is also the community relations director of the BEA. So I think that is inherently a conflict.
And so that's his second rebuttal. May I have a second rebuttal?
You can have a rebuttal.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think that that's great, but your experience on the school board left teachers on strikes, we lost 25% of our teachers. We had worse student outcomes and rising taxes. And so for me, I'm really proud to have the backing of our teachers union. I'm really excited that they endorsed me in this race. And I think that it's just, again, a testament to my commitment to our community and more importantly, my commitment to our students and families.
Seth, I need to be able to respond to the school board comment.
If we could go back and forth all night. So I think we'll have to leave it there. If we can move on to the next caller, please, with the next question. Caller, please state your name and what town you're from.
Yes, hi. My name is Ward 4, and question is, on the New North End Facebook page, Kienan claims that he's provided research to support progressive Councilor Perri Freeman's charter change proposal to create a new police disciplinary body that would have been biased against the police and cost the city more than $100,000 to implement. All council Democrats voted against it, and the mayor vetoed it. Kienan, you have publicly stated you supported the Biased Oversight Committee, and you would not have supported the mayor's veto. Please explain why you supported the Biased Oversight Committee. And Mark, can you please tell us whether or not you are supported as well and why?
Last time we actually started with Kienan, so this time we'll start with Mark.
So I did not see the need for an additional oversight committee. I do believe that we need additional oversight, and I support that, but I think that we could use our police commission to provide that oversight. It'd be less expensive. I think the price tag on the Citizen Control Board was $100,000 or more. It would be easier to implement. We don't need a charter change, so we don't have to go through the delays that come with, you know, having the vote, having the charter changes approved in the legislature and by the governor, and then having it come back to the city and have the various other city administrativia that has to go on in order to implement the thing. If we use the police commission, we could probably have those oversight changes in place much quicker, maybe, you know, even this year sometime. So I just thought it was an easier sort of way to go about that, solving that problem. And I supported the mayor's veto.
Sorry about that, Mark. Kienan, we'll go to you.
Yeah, well, thanks for the call, the question. And, you know, I actually wrote the research memo for both Councilor Freeman and Councilor Carpenter. And if you go back and read the memo, which again, is posted on the Facebook page, it talked about empowering our police commission and making sure that we were doing exactly what our police commission has suggested we do, and a lot of what the mayor's already suggested. So I'm really proud to see that that research is getting put to work, that people are adopting my ideas and putting them into action. That's really what I'm about. I'm about finding solutions and solving problems. Now, when it comes to the mayor's veto, I come from a background in a state where it's really important that you give, you know, people the opportunity to weigh in. I don't value when people aren't giving the value to voice their voice on really anything. And I think that when we hear people saying, I really want to be able to give people an opportunity to participate, but then veto the initiatives that they want to participate in, that doesn't sit well with me. And, you know, I'm coming from a background where in Washington State, my ability to get married, my ability to, you know, love my husband, to be in a loving relationship with him, that was put on the ballot by voters. And still, I was in support of making sure that that vote got heard by the voters. Because when we allow voters to participate, it sends a signal to our elected officials. I didn't think that the control board would pass. I think it would probably have gone down poorly, but it would have sent a signal to the rest of the council that, hey, we need to move forward in a different direction. And I don't think that we shouldn't be giving people the opportunity to participate. We've seen what happens when we don't let our neighbors participate. We've seen increased partisanship. We've seen people less trusting of government, and we've seen people less willing to participate in the process. That doesn't sit right with me. So I'm your city councilor. If you disagree with me, you have a right to be heard on that. And I would encourage you to vote on, you know, against measures that I was voting on if it went before the people, if you disagreed with me. That's really what's important to me.
May I rebut?
Thank you. Yes, 30 seconds.
So with return, in terms of the veto, I think that had we gone forward with a citizen control board question, I think we would have hastened the already rapid attrition we're seeing in our police department. We need to rein that in. We need to send a signal that we're going to stabilize this attrition. We need to add more officers to the police force. So I think that sometimes in government, you just have to make the hard decisions. You can't send everything to the voters. And this is one of those things where this should have never been put on the ballot. And Moreau was right in vetoing it. And I think that we'll probably be able to get to a better place with public safety because of it.
Thank you. So we've got about 4.5 minutes left. So I'd like to go quickly for one last caller, then circle back for closing statements. If I could ask you to keep your answers to the next caller to about 90 seconds, I'll flash that 15-second to go thing and we'll go that route. Great, caller, you're with us. If you can share your name and the town you're from.
Awesome.
Hello, caller, you're on live. Welcome to Town Meeting TV.
Oh, I think I'm calling into the wrong debate. Sorry about that.
No problem. Okay. So we'll shift back. You, there was mention of items on the charter. Could both of you please, in a minute, share what you think of the charter items and if there are any of them that are of particular importance to you that you support? And we'll start with you, Kienan.
Yeah, so I think just real quickly, I think we should vote in favor of the school budget. I think Tom Flanagan has done a really good job of cutting some of the resources, but I do think that we need to make sure that we keep our school funded. We've seen what happens when we don't fund our school properly. We've seen that when we don't keep our schools supported through both the renovation project that's going on. And so I think that everyone should be happy to have good schools and good teachers. When it comes to the airport commission, easy one. I think Winooski should have a say in their airport. It affects them, see no problem there. The thermal energy system, I wrote next, and so that would be question 3 and question 7. I written extensively about this. I'm in favor of both of them. I know that people think that there's going to be a tax on gasoline. That's not in there. That's not in there on home heating fuel. This is really about future-proofing Burlington and making sure that we're setting up our new buildings for the kind of electrification that we need as we get green energy online. It's not going to tax your home heating fuel. Sarah Carpenter and put in the amendment, an actual amendment that would require that to go to a voters if the city council wanted to do that. I think as far as the just cause evictions, I support Sarah Carpenter and her view on that. I think that she, as a housing advocate, she's done a great job balancing the needs of our landlords with the balancing of our tenants, and I'm in full support of that. And I see I'm out of time. Thank you.
And thank you. Mark.
So I also support the school budget. It's less than a 1% increase in spending, and that's hard to do in any year, so I applaud that. I support the airport commission expansion. I do not support the charge change to regulate thermal energy systems. I think we need to think about how to implement policy to get adoption. We need to make sure that we don't worsen affordability for homeowners with that. And I also think the net zero roadmap didn't anticipate regulating carbon at the local level. It anticipated regulating it at the regional, state, and federal level. So I don't support that one. I don't support the ranked choice voting initiative. It's a political power play by one party with the same flawed. It's the same flawed system that we repealed in 2010. And I don't know why it would be any better now for city council elections than it was for mayoral elections before. I don't support just cause eviction. I don't think anybody's made the case for it. I don't think we have the data for it. We need to collect the data and see if they actually have a problem there. And I do support the authorization of retail cannabis sales, and I support the advisory question when applied to a policy that does not have the same problematic aspects as question 3 has.
And Mark, you can keep going with 30 seconds for your closing statement to why you should be voted city council.
So my closing statement. There's a clear choice in this election. If you like the way the city council under the leadership of Max Tracy and the Progressives has been governing, then vote for Kienan. If you want more balance and someone who will work toward reasonable, pragmatic solutions to problems and issues, then I hope you'll consider voting for me. You can find out more about my campaign at markbarlow.org. Also, I want to put in an early plug for the food drive we're organizing at the Ethan Allen Shopping Center on 227. We'll be posting more information on that as the date gets closer.
Shifting you, Kienan, with 30 seconds for closing.
I believe that when we're coming together as a community, there really is nothing that we can't undo, and there's nothing that we can't stop, and there's nothing that we can't accomplish. The choice in this election is about somebody who's got proven experience, who's listened to many of you, who said, let's get a community dinner, let's get a book group, let's solve the problem of incarcerated moms not seeing their children, and let's find common ground. I'm really tired of the partisanship that's coming down from the national elections seeping into our neighborhoods. I want somebody who's going to support people coming together, who's going to look at their neighbors and say, well, you can disagree with me, but we can still find common ground and find a path forward. If you want a voice who can bring people together, who can solve problems, and who's got experience, I'm your guy.
Great. Voters in Burlington have a tough decision to make on March the 2nd. Remember, polls will be open from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. It's a wonderful time to check in with the city clerk, find out where you should be voting, how you can vote early, how you can vote safely in a way that's comfortable to you as well. Again, don't forget, Town Meeting TV can be your resource for tracking not just election night results, but making sure you're informed when you go to the polls. Kienan, Christianson, and Mark Barlow, despite my duff there at the beginning in regards to an incumbency, I'm sure the Burlington voters are very happy to have both of you on the ballot and appreciate your willingness to serve. Thanks for your time tonight, and thanks for a wonderful forum.
Thank you, Seth. Thank you.
Take care.
This has been a Good evening, and thank you for joining us on Town Meeting Television as we move towards that first Tuesday in March, March the 2nd, 2021, and Town Meeting Day. This is your place to stay informed about what you'll see on your ballot, what candidates you'll see that you can vote for on Town Meeting Day. And that's that time in Vermont when Vermonters have traditionally come to vote on those local issues and local elections. So Town Meeting TV election forums introduce you to community decision makers and connect you with the issues to shape your local community. And tonight, we're pleased to be covering this Burlington City Council South District, and we'll be welcomed by Joan Shannon, Incumbent, Democrat, and also Grace Ahmed, who's running as an independent. If you're watching this live, we welcome your participation. You can call in with questions at 802-862-3966. Again, that's 802-862-3966. Please note that if you ask questions, it'll be available to all candidates, so we'll have everybody will have an opportunity to answer. Remember, you can stay tuned to Town Meeting Television on Comcast channel 1087, also Burlington Telecom channel 17 and 217, and the Town Meeting Television YouTube page. So for tonight's format, we'll have a 1-minute opening statement for each candidate. And then we'll move to questions. If there's questions from the public or from the moderator, each candidate will have 2 minutes to respond. We'll rotate between folks. I'll hold up a little note when you have 15 seconds left on your time and when time has expired. We appreciate everybody abiding by those rules. We also will provide an opportunity for candidates to have up to 30-second rebuttal comments or questions for each question that's asked, if those are used. And we'll try to make room for 30-second closing comments for candidates. So with that, we're excited to welcome our 2 candidates. And Joan Shannon, we welcome opening statements from you for 1 minute as to why Burlington voters should choose you.
Thank you, Seth, and thank you to Town Meeting TV for hosting these forums. It's really a wonderful way to get to know a little bit about candidates and a great source of information for voters. So I'm grateful that we have this service in our community. I'm running because of my deep love for this city and for my neighbors. I ran for city council for the first time because I really wanted to bring the collective voice of the community to the table. Our community doesn't speak with one voice on almost any issue, but giving different opinions and not just the loudest or most frequently voiced opinion consideration in my decision-making has been my commitment to my constituents. That doesn't mean I cast every vote in agreement with every voter. Obviously, that's not possible, but I do weigh the strength of each argument in making my decisions. I'm forthright about where I stand, and I tell you how I voted and why. Sometimes we disagree. I also respect that sometimes I'm wrong and try to question my own confidence in the right answer. What would be different if I were not elected? I have a reputation for speaking directly and plainly, telling the story of what happens at the city council. You would lose my voice at the table, which of late is often a voice of dissent, and the council would be more homogenous in thought. And I do want to emphasize that it is important to, even when you don't win, to represent another viewpoint at the table. And fortunately, sometimes I do win, but it is important to have a diversity of thought.
Thank you, Councilor Shannon. Grace Ahmed, welcome, and we welcome your 1-minute opening statement. Oh, you're on mute. That's the top line.
Okay, I have to unmute myself. Yeah. So my name is Grace Ahmed. I've been living on Howard Street for the last 15 years, raising my 5 children, and I have been doing community organizing work with workers' rights and educational equity for a long time, and racial justice as a backdrop of where that stuff lands. And I'm running for city council now because I was approached and asked to do so. And I am not just trying to replace Joan Shannon with Grace Ahmed, but I really am committed to changing the structures that we have so that there's more direct democracy and less reliance on us being good representatives that represent everybody.
Thank you, Grace. So no mercy, we're going to move right into a lightning round, and there's 6 initiatives on the city ballot this year. Which of those 6 ballot items stand out to you and why? And if you can quickly share with voters what your position is on those items. And since we started with Joan first, Grace, we'll start with you. We'll move to a 2-minute response format. And it looks like we've got a frozen Grace. So actually we'll shift. Oh, Grace, are you there?
I'm having some internet access issues.
We've got you now.
Yeah. So honestly, the thing that stands out to me most is the 7th item that's been dropped out and was not allowed on as a charter change item to be voted by the people. Of what's remaining, you know, I think just cause eviction is a place that Joan, Shannon, and I disagree. There's probably many places that we do agree. I'm definitely pro getting a new ambulance, things that are easy, low hanging. I've had my own experience with not being able to access an ambulance. And so that's something that's very crucial to public safety. Do you want me to, in 2 minutes, go through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, yes, no, or
your time.
So I think that just cause eviction is probably the one that we will be disagreeing on the most. I'm a landlord, concerns about this. My concern still is that I don't know how it protects tenants enough, because you can write anything that you want into a lease agreement. And so I do appreciate it as a sort of symbolic gesture of how we're going to manage the rapid gentrification that keeps people from being able to work in Burlington and then afford on the wages that they're paid in jobs that they work here to live in the city that they work in. Going from service workers in restaurants, people working in our schools, all the way up to police officers that I've talked to in BPD who cannot live in.
Great, and that was time.
In the city.
Thank you, Grace. Joan, same question back to you on the ballot items. What stood out to you the most? And if you have time to go through the 6 items and your stance on them.
Yes, thank you. And I agree with Grace that we disagree on just cause evictions. And I really disagree with it because I think the name in itself is misleading. It has very little to do with evictions. It has to do with permanent tenancy, perpetual leases, rent control, and making the landlord-tenant relationship very litigious. It will disincentivize landlords who take a chance on tenants that maybe don't have a great rental history, or maybe not such a good credit history, or you know, a variety, you know, maybe a criminal past or something. We really need landlords who will take those chances. And in this market, there isn't a financial incentive to do that already. But when you add this on top of that, you're really disincentivizing landlords taking a chance on tenants with imperfect records. You know, a lot of people say that, well, you can always get a tenant out because, as Grace said, you can put whatever you want in your lease. But the problem is that with just cause evictions, your lease will never terminate. Your lease is not the end of tenancy. And even if you put into your lease, the lease is the end of tenancy, the lease is still not the end of tenancy. And whatever you feel is a breach of the terms of lease, you would have to prove that. And there's a lot of things that happen outside of a lease. You may have two tenants and one may be making racist comments to another. We heard testimony of one tenant sexually assaulting another tenant, and the victim was a child, and the family didn't want to come forward about that. So it's very hard to prove. And in that case, it would be the victim that would have to move, because you wouldn't be able to get the perpetrator out as long as they're paying their rent. Thank you.
Thank you. City of Burlington, this is your city council race, and you can participate tonight by calling 802-862-3966. And we're now going to go to the phones where we've got a couple callers.
Get my 30 seconds here. Because I'm a landlord, I had that very same initial reaction when I heard about Just Cause, and I said, well, doesn't that disincentivize people to take a chance on someone that doesn't have a stellar rental record? I manage properties for my family, and we have people in that we exactly took a chance. I think when you think it through, when you get to the end of that, if they are not in violation of their lease, those people that you took a chance on are good tenants. Those people that you took a chance on and have violated their lease, have done a criminal behavior, have harassed their neighbors, that's all stuff that is dealt with just as easily with this change as without it. Thank you.
Sure, Joan, with your 30-second rebuttal.
Thank you. That's really not true, because with the status quo, at the end of the lease, you would be able to say to that tenant, I'm sorry, I don't want to renew your lease. But now you would actually have to go through a formal eviction process, and you would have to prove it in court. It makes it very litigious. You would have to prove whatever breach there was, and these things that happen between tenants is not easy to prove. And that would be asking one tenant to rat out another tenant in court, not just calling you up and saying, they just called me a racist slur. That's no longer enough.
Thank you very much. We'll now go to the phone lines. Caller, if you can please share your name and the town that you're from, please.
Yes, my name is Matt. I'm from Burlington. My question is this: is the city of Burlington and the council in general best served by more activists on the city council, when in essence the role is to be neutral and dispassionate across the board? Thank you.
Great. And your name and the town you're from, caller?
Yeah, I'm Matt from Burlington.
Thank you, Matt. So we started with Grace first last time, so we'll go to Joan first. 2 minutes.
Thank you. I think that probably most of us come to the council because we are some kind of activist. I was an activist in my community. I was organizing my community. I organized a neighborhood fair. I got camps for all the kids in my neighborhood, which is a low-income neighborhood. And my kids, the kids here, were getting into trouble because unlike the more middle-class kids, they didn't have camps in the summer. So there is, when you're talking about maybe more militant activism, I do think there were things I was active on, such as I was very opposed to the Champlain Parkway Southern Connector. And I realized when I became a city councilor, no longer could I be looking at my personal views on something. I now had to listen to those who felt like the Southern Connector was their lifeline in their neighborhood for a variety of reasons, as well as the people in my neighborhood who feel like they would be negatively impacted by this road, and then balance all of those interests. So you can't have a narrow focus when you're on the council. You have to have a very broad focus, and you have to have a very broad level of interest. I don't know that anybody is really an impartial arbiter of these issues, but it is certainly important to not be blind or deaf to a different point of view. And I think that's responsive.
Great. Grace, up to 2 minutes.
So I think that someone that's on council by nature, I think, is an active force that's going to be making decisions, and saying that someone's an activist doesn't give them more of an opinion than the status quo that's here. That's certainly an opinion in and of itself. And the idea that the incumbency and the establishment is a neutral and impartial thing, and that things that are seeking to change that is activism, I think misses the active part of it, of maintaining the status quo. And I think maybe that question is meant for me because I'm saying I'm a community organizer, and the concern there is that I am biased and that I am not going to be a rational decision maker. So I guess I'd like to give more of my background. I'm working on a master's degree in data science and complex systems. I have a science background, and what I'm looking for our city is to really step up our commitment to having vigorous scientific method inform our efficacy studies and our policy analysis, and make our city more accountable to the people who are vesting it with our power and our voice and our vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Grace. Yes, Joan, 30 seconds.
It's not so much a rebuttal, but just to kind of bring it together. I think that what's important is not being married too much to an ideology. What's important is listening to the entire community and making a decision based on the interest of the city, and not just furthering my own personal ideology on any particular issue.
Thank you. So we've got a little over 10 minutes left, so we're gonna move along. We don't have another caller on. Could we talk a little bit about policing and community safety, which has been a hot button issue in the city lately? Was the city council's decision to cut the police department budget by 30% the right decision? Why or why not? And what needs to be done to meet the community safety and policing needs for the city? And I believe we started with Joan first last time. So Grace, we can start with you.
Okay. So yes, I think that the 30% reduction is a step that needs to happen now. It is what the community is really calling for. I think that the Racial Justice Alliance is not a small thing. I think that that is multiple people that are involved and have been doing this work for many years before the zeitgeist made it pop up into our consciousness here. And I think that the idea that we need to come to consensus that is the consensus of the incumbency, that we need to compromise until we all agree with the incumbency, is a really big problem. And it's one of the motivating things that drove me to run, because I found it very difficult to swallow that we had acts of violence done by people that were authorized to do so. And when our community came together and cried out and said, we do not feel safe with those people policing us, we do not feel safe with those people being armed and authorized to use violence against us, and we were told that there was no legal recourse to remove people that we don't feel safe having walking around in our community with guns, it's unacceptable to require us to come to the consensus that everything is a-okay. And what is needed here is creativity in thinking about how we are going to address the needs of people who live here who don't feel safe. Do not feel safe calling the police when a crime is occurring. So who do you call?
Thank you, Grace. And Joan, 2 minutes on the same question about the council's decision in community policing.
Thank you. Grace is exactly right. How are we going to meet the needs of people who don't feel safe? That is the bottom line. And unfortunately, the question was not asked or answered when we defunded the police by 30% without a plan. And I know that my progressive colleagues would say, oh, but there is a plan. The plan is to use those funds for other community services. That is not a plan. That is a goal. You have to look at what are those other community services that we need to fill in? What do they cost in comparison with the money that would be saved by defunding the police? Can we leverage other community resources outside of Burlington? I will tell you, I see a profound need in this community for better mental health care. I think it is shameful that a man went to our hospital 3 times in one day, was refused service, then went out on the highway, and 5 children died that night. And we cannot blame the police when they are the last stop, when people are unable to get other services. I think the police themselves would be the first to say, we welcome other services. They go to calls that are mental health calls, and they call for help from the mental health providers, and they can't get it. So yes, we do need to look at our public safety system, and we do need to invest in other resources. A lot of that investment comes from the state and federal government. It cannot come from the city, and you can't just take what we have from the police to do that, because it's not enough.
Thank you, Councilor Shannon. And now we have a call in. And caller, if you could please share your name and what town you're from, and please speak up when you ask your question. Good evening.
My name is Monica, and I'm from Burlington. And my question is, VT Digger just had a powerful piece on the number of women of color who, due to racism and exclusion, have left their homes or leadership roles in Vermont out of concern for their safety. What is your plan for ensuring the safety and inclusion of women and people of color in Burlington?
Great. And the last time we started with Grace, so this time we'll start with Joan.
I think that that's a really good question, and there's no simple answer to that question. It's absolutely shameful the way people feel comfortable attacking people in public right now is horrific, and it is worse for people of color. It's not very good for a lot of us. And I think that we need to change the conversation in our community, and we need to start talking to each other and trying to find our common ground. I wish I did have an answer. I really think that there's a lot we need to do to fight racism in our community. And I welcome the new awakening we have around this issue. I welcome the work that the city is doing. We have established the Office of racial equity, inclusion, and belonging. We've invested $1 million in these efforts. And I think we have to continue doing that, continue doing everything that we can. We want to support people of color in a variety of aspects of our lives. We want to support them in business. We want to support them in politics. And I also support the reparations task force that the City Council started to start that discussion, because we really do need to have more of a reckoning. We need to not yell at each other about it, but to raise awareness and educate people.
Grace, if you'd like to address the caller's questions.
Yeah, so we've had in Vermont, we've had, you know, a few very disturbing instances of women of color being threatened and that being really not taken seriously. So that's, you know, that's something that's a cultural issue and something that where the police are the thing, where people are making threats against someone, sometimes it is time to call the police. But I guess what I'd like to touch on there is accessibility for women of color, especially. I think I can think of things that are helpful as a mother, you know, having childcare available at meetings, during these things where public processes are happening, and having food for families to make women who are also managing families make that accessible to us. I think stipends for public service for women and underrepresented people and people who can't afford to take time off and need to be paid for their time is a mechanism that can be used. And so in my education organizing, we've done what we call listening campaigns, which is where we go into a setting and we just start having conversations and we ask people what they need. And so that would be really my first step in addressing it, instead of making up my own thing, would be talking to women of color. What are the barriers that you are facing? And how can we make public service and public process more accessible to you?
Thank you, Grace. And you can actually stay off mute, because I'll ask now that you each take 30 seconds to do your closing statements as to why you're the best candidate for Burlington. Grace, we'll start with you.
Okay. So I am the best candidate because I am not running to be the best candidate. I am running to make more options for direct democracy. I want voters to be able to bring charter changes directly to ballot. I want us to be able to directly govern ourselves so that we know that we have the consent of ourselves to be governed by ourselves.
Thank you, Grace. And now, Joan, we'll shift to you for 30 seconds for closing statement.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you to Grace for raising that issue. And it's a good point of disagreement, I think, respectfully. I don't think that we want every issue on the ballot. And I think it's important to have representatives that can, you know, listen to different voices in the community and make a decision in the best interest of the collective to our best ability. The charter change is a good example, the one that was vetoed. It was 6 pages long. What would have gone on the ballot was a short paragraph. People really wouldn't have known what they were voting on, because these topics are complex and you need people at the table who will dig in, decipher it, communicate it to the public, and then make decisions based on the informed feedback that we get. Thank you.
Thank you both so much. Thanks. I know the residents of Burlington are grateful for your willingness to serve. And thank you for your time tonight. Don't forget that on that first Tuesday in March, March the 2nd, you can vote between 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. You can also make an early voting plan to vote safely. And we appreciate you tuning in to Town Meeting Television to learn more about the issues and candidates. And Grace and Joan, thank you very much for joining us today. And this has been a production from Town Meeting Television. Thank you all and have a great evening.
Thank you, Seth. Thank you, Grace.
Thank you.